Thank you for attending tonight's public meeting to receive information and provide input on the proposed second dwelling unit policies and regulations for the town of Pelham. We will be providing a summary of the changes, followed by an opportunity for questions and comments. How did we get here? The Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing introduced Bill 108, More Homes, More Choice Act, on May 2nd, 2019. The bill proposed a number of amendments to 13 different statutes, including the Planning Act, the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal Act, and the Development Charges Act. The changes to the Planning Act require that municipal official plans and zoning bylaws must contain provisions permitting additional residential units, subject to applicable provisions in the Ontario Fire Code, Building Code, and municipal bylaws. Over the last few years, planning staff have received inquiries from the public regarding the establishment of SDUs and the process required to build such a unit in their dwelling and/or accessory building. The number of inquiries have grown considerably over the last few years, with staff fielding approximately 2 to 3 inquiries a month regarding the provincial changes and establishing a SDU on their property. This level of inquiry is indicative of a need to update the town official plan and zoning bylaw to address second dwelling units. A web page dedicated to the Second Dwelling Units, or SDUs, project has been posted on the Town of Pelham website. This web page includes explanations of what is required of the town, why second dwelling units are needed, the planning process that is currently being undertaken, how to comment, graphics, and contact information. Following the public meeting, some revisions may be required to the drafts, and a recommendation report on final policies and regulations will be prepared for Council with a date yet to be determined. The draft framework for second dwelling units in the town consists of a draft official plan amendment and a draft zoning bylaw amendment. I'm going to highlight the changes proposed by each one. At present, the official plan does not contain policies specific to second dwelling units, but does allow for accessory apartments only in single detached dwellings and only in the College and Emmett Street neighborhood. However, the zoning bylaw has not been updated to conform with this policy. The draft proposes to permit a second dwelling unit and a principal dwelling unit in an accessory structure subject to meeting specific policy requirements. Those policies including deleting and replacing accessory apartments throughout the number of sections in the official plan. The staff proposed changes will replace section B1.1.4, accessory apartments, with second dwelling units throughout the section. These policies would be slightly amended to ensure that the floor area of the proposed unit will be less than the gross floor area of the principal residential unit. Also, a second dwelling unit will not contribute to density, but will be included in the town's intensification targets. The current official plan allows for accessory apartments in East Fonthill low, medium, and mixed-use density residential, as well as an urban commercial highway. The proposed official plan amendments would replace accessory apartments with second dwelling units and continue to allow the permissions within the listed designations. Updating the language from accessory apartment to second dwelling unit is consistent with the language used by the provincial government, and using consistent terminology will help minimize confusion. The final amendment is to replace accessory apartments, secondary suites, with second dwelling units in the residential intensification definition. Currently, the zoning bylaw does not contain specific regulations permitting a second dwelling unit. The zoning bylaw amendment seeks approval to permit second dwelling units that are self-contained dwelling units with bathroom, kitchen, and sleeping facilities that are separate from those of the principal dwelling on the same lot. The amendment will permit a second dwelling unit in the agricultural zone, specialty rural zone, residential village 1, residential 1, and residential 2 zones, and comply with the provisions of the town's comprehensive zoning bylaw. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment only permits a second dwelling unit in a single detached dwelling, not in a townhouse or semi-detached dwelling, as the proposed official plan amendment specifies that where a second dwelling unit is proposed in a townhouse or semi-detached unit, a zoning bylaw amendment is required. Second dwelling units will be defined as a second dwelling unit on a lot with a principal dwelling that is created through converting part of or adding on to the existing dwelling that maintains an independent entrance or within a detached accessory building. Second dwelling units are also referred to as secondary suites, basement apartments, accessory apartments, granny flats, in-law apartments, or nanny suites. Second dwelling units permitted within any principal residential dwelling, single detached, semi-detached, or townhouse dwelling are subject to only one SDU permitted per lot. Maximum floor area does not exceed 65 square meters, and one entrance is permitted to face a street inclusive of the principal dwelling. Entrance to a second dwelling unit must be separate from the entrance provided for the principal dwelling. A minimum of one parking stall is required, and it may not be located in a private garage or carport, and in accordance with Section 6.16 of this bylaw, and a building permit must be issued. If located in a detached accessory building, the unit must be located within the cluster of buildings on the property. No accessory residential building or structure shall exceed 7.2 meters in height. If the second dwelling unit is in an accessory structure and not connected to the principal dwelling, the second dwelling unit must meet the requirements for accessory structures on the property. And if the second dwelling unit is within the agricultural zone, the maximum distance an SDU is permitted from the closest portion of the principal dwelling located on a property with a well and or septic servicing is 40 meters. At the time of preparing this presentation, no comments were received, but since that time, a number of comments have been sent in via email or phone calls. The comments received to date are summarized as follows. Sherry Roosin provided written comments and is a registered participant for tonight's meeting. Sherry is hoping to accommodate housing for her mother-in-law on their property for care purposes and is supportive of the policies and regulations. Murray and Helen Downing provided written comments and expressed that their primary concern is parking, as they currently experience issues with parking in their neighborhood. Anne-Marie Matthews spoke with staff regarding her support for second dwelling units, as it will make a difference in how she can care for her aging parents, keep them out of long-term care, provide for a better quality of life, and allow for intergenerational living. Anne-Marie is also a registered participant at tonight's meeting. Evan Lung had a phone call with staff and followed up on an email voicing his support for second dwelling units in Pelham, as he and his wife hope to build a second dwelling unit on their property for his in-laws. This will provide for an affordable and suitable solution for housing and allow them to be close to their grandchildren. Michael and Mary Hughes provided written comments and believe that the town of Pelham and Niagara are unaffordable for first-time homebuyers. In principle, they agree with the policies and regulations, but want to ensure that parking bylaws are enforced, especially parking on streets. Mike and Carol Jones are not supportive and would like SDUs to only be permitted in new subdivisions, only in a basement, not in accessory structures, and require notification to neighbors if someone in the area is building a second dwelling unit. Mike Jones is a registered participant at tonight's meeting. Tim Nohara is supportive of policies and grateful that Pelham will be providing policies to permit second dwelling units as an affordable solution to the housing crisis. His comments are with respect to the maximum size permitted of these second dwelling units. He believes that the zoning of the property should dictate the permitted size of the unit. For example, agriculturally zoned properties can permit a larger sized unit. Also, it was suggested to increase the maximum distance of a second dwelling unit in an accessory structure on an agriculturally zoned property from 40 meters to 100 meters or larger. Patrick Maloney provided comments specific to the interpretation of the provincial policies, which he will expand upon tonight as a registered participant at this meeting. Todd Barber provided written comments in support of the policies and regulations. As a local designer, he understands the demand for good quality affordable rental units and believes that this is important to provide for family members of all ages. To provide an affordable solution to those in need. In summary, town staff have provided a brief outline of the proposed policy and regulatory changes relating to second dwelling units for information purposes. We are now seeking public input on these proposals. We note that the drafts may be changed following this meeting, and the input received before any final changes would be considered by council. Town staff are not making any recommendations or decisions at this meeting, and we welcome the opportunity for feedback and input on these amendments. Any questions or comments on these files can be forwarded to myself, Tara Lynn O'Toole, through the contact information on this slide. This presentation will be available on the town's website as part of the agenda package for future reference. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.